I'm recording, right? I don't even know. I am. Okay. This is gonna be the book, 19 something. I forgot. I already forgot. Holy shit. George Orwell. God. Orwell. I don't know how to pronounce it. 1984. Okay. This is gonna be a read. It's not professional. Oh my god, I forgot where I was. It's not a professional read. I already read the first 2 pages. Or maybe the first 4 or 5 pages because this is a compressed version of the book. I'm gonna read it. You missed nothing, by the way. Most of those pages were talking about the party, and that's the entire book, so it will be re-mentioned no matter what it was. Anyways, so I'm gonna start reading. I forgot where I left off, so. Medicine. Instantly, his face turned scarlet, and the water ran out of his eyes. The stuff was like. By the way, my English is not the best. It's okay, so it's okay. The stuff was like nitric acid, and moreover, in swallowing it, one had the sensation of being hit on the back of the head with a rubber club. The next moment, however, the burning in his belly died down and the world began to look more cheerful. He took a cigarette from a crumpled packet marked Victory Cigarettes and unconsciously held it upright, whereupon the tobacco fell out onto the floor. With the next he was more successful. He went back to the living room and sat down at a small table that stood to the left of the telescreen. From the table drawer to hook, he took out a penholder, a bottle of ink, and a thick quarto-sized blank book with a red back and marbled cover. For some reason, the telescreen in the living room was in an unusual position. Instead of being placed, instead of being placed as was normal in the end wall where it could command the whole room, it was in the longer wall opposite the window. To one side of it there was a shallow alcove I don't know what alcove is, in which Winston was not sitting, and which when the flats were built had probably been intended to hold bookshelves. By sitting in the alcove, god damn it, I don't know what that means. I'm gonna look it up. Again, this is not a professional read. I'm gonna look up a lot of things and yeah, fucking swallow my breath, whatever that's called. Alcove.
Alcove.
Alcove. A very British word. What the fuck is that word? In the wall of a room. What is that word? I have no idea. The rest of the table were little alcoves around the wall. I have no idea. Anyways, I'm gonna shit. I have no idea. The rest of the tables were in little alcoves around the wall. Niche. What the fuck are these words? Anyways, I don't give a shit. Uh, and keeping well back, Winston was able to remain outside the range of the telescreen, so far as sight went. He could be heard, of course, but so long as he stayed in his present position, he could not be seen. It was partially the unusual geography of the room that had suggested to him the thing that he was now about to do. Okay. But it had also been suggested by the book that he had just taken out of the drawer. It was precisely beautiful book. It was a precisely beautiful book. Its smooth, creamy paper, a little yellowed by age, was of a kind that had not been manufactured by at least 40 years past. He could guess, however, that the book was much older than that. He had seen it laying in the window of a frothy little what the fuck is that one? Frowsy, what are you? What are you? What are you? Frozy, Frowsy.
Frowsy.
Okay. Scruffy and neglected in appearance. Okay. What the frick? Frowsy. Had of a frowsy little junk shop in a slummy quarter of the town. Just what quarter he did not now remember. Okay. And had been stricken immediately by an overwhelming desire to possess it. Party members were supposed not to go into ordinary shops, dealing on the free market, it was called. But the rule was not strictly kept. Because there were various things. Because there were various things such as shoelaces and razor blades, which it was impossible to get hold of in any other way. He had given a quick glance up and down the street, and then had slipped inside and bought the book for $2.50. $2.50. Why is it written in dollars? Isn't this like a British book? I don't know. At the time, he was not conscious of wanting it for any particular purpose. He had carried it, oh good lord, guiltily. Am I pronouncing it right? Okay, I get the word, but like, am I pronouncing it right? Of course. Where's translate?
Guilty.
That is not what I put down. That is not. That is not. Guiltily.
Guiltily.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Carried it guiltily home in his briefcase, even with nothing written in it. It was a compromising. Oh my god. Compromising. I didn't. Okay. Possession. Compromising. Oh my god. It was a compromising possession. The thing that he was about to do was to open a diary. This was not illegal. Nothing was illegal since there were no longer any laws. But if detected, it was reasonably certain that it would be punished by death. Holy shit. Or at least by 25 years in forced labor camp. Fucking kill me. Winston fitted a nib, and this is so British, into the pen holder and sucked it to get the grease off. The pen was an, oh boy, archaic instrument. I don't know if I read that right, so we're gonna like look. Archaic? I don't know.
Archaic.
Archaic. I'm sorry, I'm not very old. Okay. The pen was an archaic instrument. Of course it is. Seldom used even for signatures, and he had procured one, furtively and with some difficulty, simply because of a feeling that the beautiful creamy paper deserved to be written on with a real nib, instead of being scratched with an ink pencil. Actually, he was not used to writing by hand, apart from very short notes. It was usual to detect everything into the speak write, which was of course impossible for his present purpose. He dipped the pen into the ink and then faltered for just a second. A tremor had gone through his bowels. To mark the paper was the decisive act. In small clumsy letters he wrote April 4th, 1984. He sat back. A sense of complete helplessness had descended upon him. To begin with, he did not know with any certainty that this was 1984. It must be round about that date, since he was fairly sure that his age was 39, and he believed that he had been born in 1944, or 1945, but it was never possible nowadays to pin down any date within a year or two. For whom it was suddenly occurred to him to wonder, was he writing this diary for the future, for the unborn? His mind hovered for a moment round the doubtful date on the page, and then fetched up with a bump against the newspeak. Word dub good lord. Double think. Anyways, for the first time, the magnitude of what he had undertaken came home to him. How could you communicate with the future? It was of its nature impossible. Neither the future could resemble the present, in which case it could not listen to him, or it would be different from it, and his predicament could be meaningless. For some time he sat gazing stupidly at the paper. The telescreen had changed over to strident military music. It was curious that he seemed not merely to have lost the power of expressing himself, but even to have forgotten what it was that he had originally intended to say. For weeks past he had been making ready for this moment, and it had never crossed his mind that everything would be needed except courage. Wow. The actual writing would be easy. All he had to do was to transfer to paper the interminable, restless monologue that had been running inside his head literally for years. At this moment, however, even the monologue had dried up. Moreover, his fuck. This is not ferocious. Very fuck. I don't know. Girl, what is that? Ulcer. Okay, how do you pronounce it? It is not. Translate. Translation. I don't actually want the translation. I just, you know what? I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit how to pronounce it. Moreover, his whatever ulcer had begun itching unbearably. He dared not scratch it, because if he did, so it always become inflamed. God. The seconds were ticking by. He was conscious of nothing except the blankness of the page in front of him, the itching of the skin above his ankle, the blaring of the music, and a slight booziness caused by the gin. Suddenly he began writing in sheer panic, only imperfectly aware of what he was setting down. His small but childish handwriting struggled. That's a good one. Childish handwriting struggled up and down the page, shedding first its capital letters and finally even its full stops. April 4th, 1984. Last night to the flick. All war films. One very good one of a ship full of refugees being bombed somewhere in the Mediterranean. Audience much amused by shots of a great huge fat man trying to swim away, with a helicopter after him. First you saw him wallowing along in the water like a porpoise. Oh my god. Sorry. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Okay. I did not know that. Then you saw him through the helicopter's gun sights. Then he was full of holes. Oh my god. And the sea round him turned pink, and he sank as suddenly as though the holes had let in the water. Audience shouting with laughter when he sank. Damn. Then you saw a lifeboat full of children with a helicopter hovering over it. There was a middle-aged woman, might have been Jews. I have no idea what that is. What the hell am I reading? It was the Jew. Sorry.
Jewess.
Jewess. A Jewish woman. Okay. I did not know that either. It was a Jewess sitting up in the bow with a little boy, about 3-year-old, in her arms. Little boy screaming with fright and hiding his head between her breast as if he was trying to burrow, burrow, burrow right into her. The woman putting her arm around him and comforting, oh my god, comforting him. Or, although she was blue with fright herself, all the time covering him up was as much covering him sorry covering oh my god him up as much as possible, as if she thought her arms could keep the bullets of him. Then the helicopter planted a 20-kilo bomb in among them. Terrific flash, and the boats went all to Matchwood. Then there was a wonderful shot of a child arm going up, right up into the air. A helicopter with a camera in its nose must have followed it up, and there was a lot of applause from the party seats. But a woman down in the prowl part of the house suddenly started kicking up a fuss and shouting. They didn't out her. I don't know if I read that right. I've showed it not in front of the kid. I don't give a shit. We got this part. They didn't. They didn't. They didn't. It ain't right in front. It ain't right. Not in front of kids. It ain't until the police turned her. Turned. Oh my god. The police turned her. Turned her. What the fudge, man? Is this deliberate? I already barely read, man. Don't do this to me. Out. I don't suppose anything happened to her body. Cares with the proles. If I'm reading that right, I don't know. Say typical prole reaction. They never. Winston stopped, which is the main character. Winston stopped writing, partly because he was suffering from cramp. He did not know he did what had made him pour out this stream of rubbish. But the curious thing was that while he was doing so, a totally different memory had clarified itself in his mind. Because in the other part that I didn't read, he couldn't remember his childhood or something like that before the party. Anyways, clarified itself in his mind to the point where he almost felt equal to writing it down. It was, he now realized, because of this other incident that he had suddenly decided to come home and begin the diary today. It had happened that morning at the ministry. If anything so nebulous could be said to happen, it was nearly 1100, and in the records department there Winston worked. They were dragging the chairs out of the cubicles and grouping them in the center of the hall, opposite the big telescreen. In preparation for the 2 minutes hate, Winston was just taking his place in one of the middle rows, when two people whom he knew by sight, but had never spoken to, came unexpectedly into the room. One of them was a girl whom he often passed in the corridors. He did not know her name, but he knew that she worked in the fiction department. Dude, you worked in the same place and didn't talk to her? Presumably, since he had sometimes seen her with oily hands, yuck, and carrying a spanner, I don't know what that is, she had some mechanical job on one of the novel writing machines. Okay. She was a bold-looking girl of about 27 with thick hair, freckled face, and swift athletic movements, a narrow scarlet sash, emblem or something like that, of the junior anti-sex league, was wound several times round the waist of her overalls, just tightly enough to bring out the shapeliness. What? How do you read that? Shapeliness. What the fuck? I have no idea. Shapeliness. I have no idea. God damn AI! Translate. Shapeliness.
Shapeliness.
Ugh. Shapeliness. What the hell does that mean? I don't even know. Beauty, charm, grace. Okay. Okay. I've never heard that word. Anyways. To bring out her beauty. Okay. Of her hips. Okay, we're talking about the hips. Winston had disliked her. What? That's not what I expected. Winston had disliked her from the very first moment of seeing her. He just hates her athletic body, that fat body. He knew the reason. It was because of the atmosphere of hockey fields and cold baths and community hikes. I'm telling us about that athletic body. And general mindedness, which he managed to carry. He hates her confidence. To carry about with her. He disliked nearly all women, God, and especially the young and pretty ones. Oh, incel. It was always the women, and above all the young ones. You already said that, right? Who were the most bigoted adornate? I don't know how to read that. I don't know how to read that.
Adherent.
Adherent. Oh my god, I know that word. Supports a particular party, person, or sort of ideas. I know that one. Anyways, the most bigoted adherents of the party. Sorry. And above all, the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents of the party. The swallowers of the slogans. The amateur spies. The nosers out of unorthodoxy. But this particular girl gave him the impression of being more dangerous than most. Once, when they passed in the corridor, she gave him a quick sidelong glance which seemed to pierce right into him, and for a moment had filled him with black terror. God, I love her. The idea had even crossed his mind that she might be an agent of the thought police. That it was true, she was very unlikely. Still, he continued to feel a peculiar uneasiness which had fear mixed up in it as well as hostility. Called a crush, whatever. Whenever she was anywhere, you are, what's the word? Threatened by her, by everything you don't have on her. Anyways, near him. What was the last word? She was anywhere, whenever she was anywhere near him. Ah, okay. The other person was a man named O'Brien. Horrible name. A member of the inner party and holder of some post so important and remote that Winston had only a dim idea of its nature. A momentary hush passed over the group of people round the chairs as they saw the black overalls of an inner party member approaching. O'Brien was a large, burly man. I actually thought the opposite. I thought he was like skinny, like little boy. Not boy, but like skinny. No beard, nothing. I don't know why I just thought. I don't know. O'Brien was a large, burly man with a thick neck. He wrestled, and a coarse, humorous, brutal face. Brutal face. You have a brutal face. It's such an insult. In spite of his formidable appearance, he had a certain charm of manner. He had to develop. He had a trick of Oh my god, of wrestling. His. Oh my god, how do you read it? Because I'm reading it like wrestling. Wrestling. I don't know. Let's make sure. Why not? What's wrong with making sure? Wrestle.
Resettle.
Oh my god. Not even close. Resettling. Okay. Or cost just in a different way. Okay, just resettle. Okay, I did not resettling. Okay. He had a trick of resettling his spec- spectacles on his nose, which was curiously disarming. okay, so so you're saying what now is considered a bit charming was curiously disarming. Interesting, very interesting. In some indefinable way, curiously civilized, it was a gesture which, if anyone had still thought in such terms, might have recalled an 18th century nobleman offering his snuffbox. Obviously, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I was in the 8th century. 18th century. Witness had Winston had seen O'Brien perhaps a dozen times in almost as many years. He felt deeply drawn to him, and not solely because he was intrigued by the contrast between O'Brien's urban manner and his prize fighter's physique. Much more it was because of a secretly held belief, or perhaps not even a belief, merely a hope, that O'Brien's political orthodoxy was not perfect. Something in his face suggested its oh my god, irresistibility. And again, perhaps it was not even unorthodoxy that was written in his face, but simply intelligence. But at any rate, he had the appearance of being a person that you could talk to if somehow you could cheat the telescreen and get him alone. Okay, Winston. Winston had never made the smallest effort to verify this guess. Indeed, there was no way of doing so. At this moment, O'Brien glanced at his wristwatch, saw that it was nearly 1100, and eventually decided to stay in the records department until the 2 minutes hate was over. He took a chair in the same row as Winston. A couple of places away, a small sandy-haired woman. What the hell? Sandy-haired. What do you mean, like thick hair? What do you mean? Oh, blonde. Okay, sorry. A small sandy-haired woman who worked in the next cubicle to Winston was between them. The girl with dark hair was sitting immediately behind. The next moment a hideous, grinding screech, as if some monstrous machine running without oil, burst from the big telescreen at the end of the room. It was a noise that set one's teeth on edge and bristled the hair at the back of one's neck. The hate had started. As usual, the face of Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the people, had flashed. Okay, let's just focus on this one. This one right here. Wait. Okay. You get it. This part. This part. If you don't know, this book, like, you just start reading it and you don't know the backstory of it or something, just know that this part is very important and it's deliberate. Anyways, the enemy of the people had flashed on the screen. There were hisses here and there among the audience. The little sandy-haired woman gave a squeak of mingled fear and disgust. Goldstein was the renegade and backslider who once, long ago, how long ago? Nobody quite remembered, had been one of the leading figures of the party, almost on a level with Big Brother himself, and then had engaged in counter. This was written in the 40s. This book was written in the 40s. And then had engaged in the counter-revolutionary activities, had been condemned to death, and had mysteriously escaped and disappeared. The programs of the 2 Minute Hate varied from day to day, but there was none in which Goldstein was not the principal figure. He was the primal traitor, the earliest defiler or something of the party's purity. All subsequent crimes against the party, all treacheries, acts of sabotage. God, what is that? Heresies? What the fuck? Deviation. What is that? What is that word? I've never seen it, heard it, but I assume it's meaning from the context. But oh my God, you're killing me with this AI slob. I'm using one hand to type, so it's slow. Albidda. Okay.
Heresies.
Okay, heresies. Deviation sprang directly out of his teaching. Somewhere or other, he was still alive and hatching his conspiracy. I know that word, we can say it, conspiracies, something like that. Perhaps somewhere beyond the sea, under the protection of his foreign paymasters, perhaps even. So it was occasionally rumored in some hiding place in Oceania itself. Winston's diaphragm. What? Diaphragm? What the hell am I looking at? How do you. Yeah, my friend. I want to know how you say it.
Diaphragm.
Oh, okay, don't pronounce it. Because I was like, so anyway. Was constructed. Diagram. Was constructed. He could never see the face of Goldstein without a painful mixture of emotions. It was a lean Jewish face with a great, basically, what is that guy called? I forgot his name. It was a lean Jewish face with a great fuzzy areola. What? Fuzzy areole. What does that mean? I have no idea. What? A circle of white. Okay. Oh my God. Of white hair. That's so funny. And a small goatee beard. A clever face. And yet somehow inherently despicable, with a kind of senile silliness in the long, thin nose. God, like he's not even trying to hide it. Near the end of which a pair of spectacles was perched. It resembled, oh my God, it resembled the face of a sheep. That was a sneeze, by the way. Not a sneeze. What do you do when you need? No, what's it called? I don't know what it's called in English, but it's like has to do with the nose. Face of a sheep, and the voice too had a sheep. We get it, man. We get it. We get what he looks. We just the name was enough. Had a sheep-like quality. Goldstein was deliving his usual venomous attack upon the totalitarians of the party. An attack so exaggerated and preserves God and perverse that a child should have been able to see through it, and yet just plausible enough to fill one with an alarmed feeling that other people, less level-headed than one's self, might be taken in by it. He was abusing Big Brother. He was denouncing the dictatorship of the party. He was demanding the immediate conclusion of peace with Eurasia. He was advocating freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought. He was crying hysterically that the revolution had been betrayed. And all this in rapid polysyllabic, I don't know, polysyllabic? I don't know. I don't want to miss, you can learn things. Please don't, oh, thank God.
Polysyllabic.
Oh God, polysyllabic. I don't know. For a word, having more than one syllable. Okay, so polysyllabic. Okay. In rapid polysyllabic speech, which was a sort of parody of the hospital of the hospital style of the oh god orators. I don't know the word, man. It's getting annoying.
Orator.
A public speaker. Okay. Eloquent. Okay. It's a very specific word of the party. And even continued newspeak words, more newspeak. Sorry, I keep saying it wrong. Words indeed than any party member would normally use in real life, and all the while, least one, least one, least one, least one should be in any doubt as to the reality which Goldstein's suspicious claptrap covered. Behind his head on the telescreen there marched the endless columns of the Eurasian army, row after row of solid-looking men with expressionless Asiatic whatever faces, who swam up to the surface of the screen and vanished, to be replaced by others exactly similar. The dull, rhythmic tramp of the soldiers' boots formed the background of Goldstein's bleating voice. Before the hate had processed for 30 seconds, uncontrollable exclamations of rage were breaking out from half the people in the room. The self-satisfied sheep-like face on the screen. Okay, I hear. And the terrifying power of the Eurasian army behind it were too much to be borne. Besides, the sight or even the thought of Goldstein's produced fear and anger automatically. He was an object of hatred more constant than either Eurasia or Eastasia. Since then Oceania was at war with one of these powers, it was generally at peace with the other. But what was strange was that although Goldstein was hated and despised by everyone, although every day and a thousand times a day, on platforms, on the telescreen, in newspapers and books, his theories were refuted, smashed, ridiculed, held up to the general gaze for the pitiful rubbish that they were. In spite of all of this, his influence never seemed to grow less. Always there were fresh dupes waiting to be seduced by him, and they never passed with spies and oh my god, saboteurs acting under his directions, were not unmasked by the thought police. He was commander of the vast shadowy army, an underground network of conspirators dedicated to the overthrow of the state. The Brotherhood, oh my god, the Brotherhood, its name was supposed to be. There were also whispered stories of terrible uh, compendium of all the heresy, of which Goldstein was the author and which circulated clandestinely here and there. It was a book without a title. People referred to it, if at all, simply as the book. But one knew of such things only through vague rumors. Neither the Brotherhood nor the book was a subject that any ordinary party member would mention if there was a way of avoiding it. Okay. In its second minute, the hate rose to a frenzy. People were leaping up and down in their places and shouting at the tops of their voices in an effort to drown the maddening, bleating voice that came from the screen. The little sandy-haired woman had turned bright pink, and her mouth was opening and shutting like that of a landed fish. Even O'Brien's heavy face was flushed. He was sitting very straight in his chair, his powerful chest swelling and quivering as though he was standing up to the assault of a wave. I love that one. No. The dark-haired girl behind Winston had begun crying out, "Swine! Swine! Swine!" And suddenly she picked up a heavy Newspeak dictionary and flung it at the screen. It struck. It I love this book. It struck Goldstein's nose and bounced off. The voice continued inexorably. In a lucid moment, Winston found that he was shouting with the others and kicking his heel violently against the rung of his chair. The horrible thing about the 2 minutes hate was not that one was obliged to act a part, but on the contrary, that it was impossible to avoid joining in. Ugh. Within 30 seconds, any pretenses was always unnecessary. A hideous, oh boy, ecstasy of fear and vindictiveness, a desire to kill, to torture, to smash faces in which sledgehammer seemed to flow through the whole group of people like an electric current, turning one even against one's will into a grimacing, screaming lunatic. And yet the rage that one felt was an abstract, undirected emotion, which could be switched from one object to another like the flame of a blow lamp. Thus, at one moment, Winston's hatred was not turned against Goldstein at all, but, on the contrary, against Big Brother, the party, and the thought police, the party and the thought police. And at such moments, his heart went out to the lonely, derided heretic on the screen, sole guardian of the truth and sanity in a world of lies, and yet the very next instant he was at one with the people about him. And all that was said of Goldstein seemed to him to be true. At those moments, his secret loathing of Big Brother changed into adoration, and Big Brother seemed to tower up, an invincible, fearless protector, standing like a rock against the hordes of Asia. And Goldstein, in spite of his isolation, his helplessness, and the doubt that hung about his very existence, seemed like some sinister enchanter, capable of the mere power of his voice of wrecking the structure of civilization. Wow. And the doubt. And Goldstein, in spite of his isolation and his helplessness and doubt. Wow. I like that one. I like that one. And Goldstein, in spite of his isolation, his helplessness, and the doubt that hung about his very existence, seemed like some sinister enchanter capable, by the mere power of his voice, of breaking the structure of civilization. Sorry. It was even possible at moment to switch one's hatred this way or that by a voluntary act, suddenly, by the sort of violent effort with which one wrenches one's head away from the pillow in a nightmare. Winston succeeded in transferring his hatred from the face on the screen to the dark-haired girl behind him. Whoa. Vivid, beautiful hallucination flashed through his mind. This book is already great. He would flog her to death with a rubber truncheon. If I read that right, I don't know. He would tie her naked to a stake and shoot her full of arrows like Saint Sebastian. He would ravish her and cut her throat at the moment of climax. Whoa. Better than before. Moreover, he realized why it was that he hated her. My God, he hated her because she was young and pretty and sexless. I'm telling you, didn't sound because he wanted to go to bed with her. I'm telling you, he had a crush on her because he wanted to go to bed with her and would never do so. Sorry. Um, because round her sweet supple waist, which seems to ask you to encircle it with your arm. So cute. There was only the odious, if I'm reading that right, scarlet sash, aggressive symbol of chastity. So and so. The hate rose to its climax. The voice of Goldstein had become an actual sheep's bleat. And for an instant, the face changed into that of a sheep. My God. Then the sheep face melted into the figure of Eurasian soldier, who seems to be advancing, huge and terrible, his submachine gun roaring and seeming to spring out of the surface of the screen. So that some of the people in the front row actually flinched backwards in their seats. But in the same moment, drawing a deep sigh of relief from everybody, the hostile figure melted into the face of a big brother, black-haired, black mustachioed, full of power and mysterious calm, and so vast that it almost filled up the screen. Nobody heard what Big Brother was saying. It was merely a few words of encouragement, the sort of words that are uttered in the din of battle, not distinguishable individually, but restoring confidence by by the fact of being spoken. This is written well, obviously. I'm gonna say that. Nobody heard. Nobody heard. Where was I? Being spoken. Not distinguishable individually, but restoring confidence by the fact of being spoken. Then the face of Big Brother faded away again, and instead, the three slogans of the party stood out in bold capitals: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, which by far is the worst shit I've ever read in my life. But the face of Big Brother seemed to persist for several seconds on the screen, as though the impact that it had made on everyone's eyeballs was too vivid to wear off immediately. Ugh, I know, it's written well. That was the chair, by the way. The little sandy-haired woman had flung herself forward over the back of the chair in front of her, with that tremulous murmur that sounds like, "My savior." She extended her arms towards the screen, then she buried her face in her hands. It was apparent that she was uttering a prayer. At this moment, the entire group of people broke into a deep, slow, rhythmical chant of "beep beep, beep beep," over and over again, very slowly with a long pause between the first beep and the second. A heavy murmur sound somehow curiously savage. You know what? I love how you write that. Curiously savage. You're so good at it. Ugh. Who knew I would like a British person? In the background of which one seems to hear the stamp of naked feet and the throbbing of tum-tums. What the fuck is that? For perhaps as much as 30 seconds they kept it up. It was a refrain that was often heard in moments of overwhelming emotion. Partially it was a sort of hymen. I don't know if I'm reading that. To the wisdom. It was sort of. Is that how do you read that? I don't think that's hymen. What? I don't know. A religious. Oh.
Hymn.
So sorry, guys. I did not. I'm so sorry. A religious song or a poem to praise. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not English. I don't know. Partially, it was like a hymn. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to read. To the wisdom and the majesty of Big Brother BB. But still more, it was an act of self hypnosis, a deliberate downing of consciousness by means of rhythmic noise. Winston's entrails seemed to grow cold in the 2 minutes hate he could not help sharing in the general delirium. But this subhuman chanting of "BB, BB" always filled him with horror. Of course, he chanted with the rest. It was impossible to do otherwise. To dissemble, to dissemble your feelings, to control your face, to do what everyone else was doing was an instinctive reaction. But there was a space of a couple of seconds during which the expressions of his eyes might conceivably have betrayed him. Love you. The eyes, man. It's always the eyes. Oh my god. La, 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 la. And it was exactly at this moment that the significant thing happened. If indeed, let me say that one. Significant thing if indeed it did happen. Momentarily, he cut O'Brien's eyes. O'Brien had stood up. He had taken off his spectacles and was in the act of resettling them. Okay, we got that one. On his nose. With his characteristic gesture. But there was a fraction of a second when their eyes met. And for as long as it took to happen, Winston knew. Yes, he knew. That O'Brien was thinking the same thing as himself. An unmistakable message had passed. It was as though their two minds had opened, and that I love this, and the thoughts were flowing from one into the other through their eyes. The eyes, I am with you. O'Brien seemed to be saying to him, I know precisely what you're feeling. I know all about your contempt, your hatred, your disgust, but don't worry, I am on your side. And then the flash of intelligence was gone. Love it. Flash of intelligence. God damn it, you're a good writer. And Orion's face was as inscrutable as everyone's else. Just a second of understanding. Anyways, that was all. And he was already uncertain whether it had happened. Ugh. Such incidents never had any sequel. Ugh, you're so right. Oh, anything, sorry. What am I? They don't. It's so true. Oh my god. Anyways. God, such incidents never have any sequel. I love it. All that they did was to keep alive in him the belief, or hope, that others besides him were the enemies of the party. Perhaps the rumors of vast underground conspiracies were true after all. Perhaps the Brotherhood really existed. It was impossible, in spite of the endless arrests, oh, and confessions and executions, to be sure that the Brotherhood was not simply a myth. Some days he believed in it, some days not. There was no evidence, only fleeting glimpses that might mean anything or nothing. Snatches or overheard okay. Overheard conversations, faint scribbles on laboratory walls. Once, even when two strangers met, a small movement of the hand would have looked as though it might be a signal of recognition. It was all guesswork. Very likely he had imagined everything. He had gone back to his cubicle without looking at O'Brien again. The idea of following up the momentary contact hardly crossed his mind. It would have been inconceivably dangerous even if he had known how to set about doing it. For a second, 2 seconds, they had exchanged ah, an equivocal glance. an equivocal glance. And that was the end of the story. But even that, this is so. I love reading it. It's really hard for me to find a good book, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. I also don't read a lot, but I read. If that makes sense. So yeah, this is a really good book. It sounds good. Anyway, it's written beautifully. Anyway, glass. And that was the end of the story. But even that was a memorable event. I love it. In the locked, in the locked loneliness in which one had to live, Winston roused himself up. Okay. Straighter, he let out a blitch. I don't even sure what that means. The gin. What gin? The gin was rising from his stomach. His eyes refocused on the page. He discovered that while he sat helplessly musing, he had also been writing, as though by automatic action, and it was no longer the same cramped, awkward handwriting as before. His pen had slid voluptuously over the smooth paper, printing in large, neat capitals, down with Big Brother, down with Big Brother, down. Anyways, over and over again, filling half a page. He could not help feeling a twinge of panic. It was absurd, since the writing of these particular words was not more dangerous than the initial act of opening a diary, but for a moment he was tempted to tear out the spoiled pages and abandon the enterprise altogether. He did not do so, however, because he knew that it was useless, whether he wrote down with Big Brother or whether he refrained from writing it made no difference. Whether he went on with the diary or whether he did not go on with it made no difference. The thought police would get him just the same. He had committed, would still have committed, even he had never set pen to paper, the essential crime that contained all others in itself. Thought crime, they called it. Thought crime was not a thing that could be concealed forever. You might dodge successfully for a while, even for years, but sooner or later they were bound to get you. It was always at night. The rest, invariably, found me happened at night. The sudden jerk out of sleep, the rough hand shaking your shoulder, the lights glaring in your eyes, the ring of hard faces round the bed. In the vast majority of cases, there was no trial, no report of the arrest. People simply disappeared. Always during night. Your name was removed from the registers. Every record of everything you had ever done was wiped out. Your one-time existence was denied and then forgotten. You were abolished, annihilated, vaporized, was the usual word. For a moment, this is written so nicely. For a moment, he was seized by a kind of hysteria. He began writing in a hurried, untidily scroll, something like that. They will shoot me if I don't care. They will shoot me in the back of the neck. I don't care. Down the Big Brother. They always shoot you in the back of the neck. I don't care. Down with the Big Brother. He sat back in his chair, slightly ashamed of himself. So he basically is in denial of his, like, let's say orientation, let's say, okay? Slightly ashamed of himself and laid down the pen. The next moment he started violently. There was a knocking at the door. Already. He sat as still as a mouse, in the futile hope that whoever it was, vital. I don't know. Let's check.
Futile.
God damn it! The first one was right. In the futile hope that whoever it was might go away after a single attempt. But no, the knocking was repeated. The worst thing, the worst thing of all would be to delay. His heart was thumping like a drum, but his face, from long habit, was probably expressionless. God damn. He got up and moved heavily towards the door. And that was chapter 1, yo. Thank you. Stop.